What's up, kiddos? Sorry about our Zoom issues. It just kept on that connecting screen, restarted my computer, and no luck. So hopefully that cleans up by tomorrow. But Happy New Year. Hopefully everyone had a nice, good break. What I'm going to do is we're going to be nice and simple today, and that was kind of my design for the other classes as well, because I'm aware that it's been 11 days, 12 days or so since we've been together. So all I really want to do is just focus on one important term for today. And that term is what is called geopolitics. So let me bring up our screen share here. All right, so we're on the Middle East section of the study guide. We kind of took care of our big overview components of imperialism. We had our Africa section. Now we're on the Middle East, okay? So the big term here is geopolitics. And I have for you the definition there. Now I'm going to keep talking because you have the wonderful ability to pause this video, but here's our definition. Politics, especially international relations, as influenced by geographical factors. Okay, so if you need to pause that, make sure you write that down because that's our big topic for today. And in fact, it goes a pretty long way to explaining a whole lot of history and foreign relations between different countries. And I figured the best way maybe to highlight geopolitics, it's a very popular board game, I don't think that fun, but a very popular board game, which is Risk. Conceptually, Risk is interesting, but Risk games take a very, very long time to play. If you've played Risk, you know how it's played. If you've not played Risk, it's fairly straightforward theoretically. You have your color, your team, and you have your territories, and slowly on your spaces, if you're the red team, for example, you can build up forces and then use those forces to move into a new territory to capture it. Or if there is an enemy pieces there, to wage war against it. You go to war and you may take some casualties, you may defeat them, maybe freeze up that space, then you can move in. With your ultimate goal being in the board game of Risk, to eliminating all of your opponents and being like a little Napoleon and reigning supreme on the board, okay? But Risk is all about geopolitics. It's all about your decision as your nation or your color and what you need to do to emerge victorious over your rivals. Sometimes that means like open armed conflict, although that can oftentimes be costly. Sometimes it's negotiations. Maybe if you're the red pieces here and your brother or sister are the green pieces here and they're threatening your southern border, maybe you broker a deal with mom who has all the orange pieces here. Maybe you have like a temporary alliance where you say, hey, I'm not going to attack you, but if you attack them, like then we can kind of work together. So that's part of it. That's part of geopolitics. You may, like, if you were playing this game here, maybe you notice that, like, let's say like France and Portugal and Spain here is like an open piece, right? Well, if you're the red team, like you may want to move your pieces in there to kind of protect you, right? Because otherwise, coming right across like the Strait of Gibraltar could be mom's forces. Maybe mom goes and invades you. So suddenly, like this region here maybe becomes important because it's open, it could be acquired, and it could be a potential place where either you could be invaded or where you could defend yourself, right? If you're thinking about even like right here, there's like a narrow part where you can cross the Atlantic between Portugal and what would be like Mali or Western Sahara. And that's why you have big armies built up there, because this crossing strategically is very important. So both sides have armies built up there to defend that. If you leave it undefended, the enemy then goes and invades you, right? So you'd play this game, you'd play that geopolitical game. The geo is the geography, the regions which may hold importance. And the politics is diplomacy, is foreign relations. It may be going to war. And that's all what geopolitics is. Again, politics, especially international relations, as influenced by geographical factors, okay? If I was to use an example, and we can certainly use an example here from our history, it has to do with a place that used to be called Persia, but is today called Iran. So if I zoom out here, you can see the big picture. Okay, here we have Europe, here's Africa, Asia, Middle East, all right? And right here in the middle is the modern day country of Iran. All right, I'm actually gonna zoom out here just so that we can have a clear resolution. All right, so we have Iran. I say Iran. If you want to sound super American, you go Iran, but you don't say Illinois or Indiana. You say Indiana or Illinois. So much the same way it's Iran, Iraq, Israel. All right. So Iran used to be called Persia. For our purposes, they can be interchangeable with one another. I'm not going to get too upset if you use one historically at the wrong point in time or not. No big deal. Okay. Well, if you notice here that the Middle East nickname, if you remember, used to be called it is still called the crossroads of the world, because you have the intersection point of three continents. You have Africa, you have Europe, and you have Asia, right? And for millennia, really since the dawn of civilization, you've had trade and invasion and ideas and all sorts of stuff flowing in and out of the region. Okay, so on this crossroads, one of those crossroad places was the Iranian plateau, all right, where the Persians came from, and where modern day Iran is located. Okay, so around this time period that we're talking about in our studies, so height of imperialism, 1800s, okay, Iran is going to play right into that geopolitical game. And you're basically going to have two European powers vying for control of Iran. Okay, much in the same way like risk. Okay, think back to our examples of like France, Spain, Portugal here. Okay, if you control that territory, it can make you feel safer. It can also prevent the enemy from using that to its own advantage, right? So maybe you don't necessarily need that space, but if you think your opponent or your rival does, it may be in your best interest to take over that and to defend that because it can serve your best interests. Okay, that's geopolitics. So in the instance of Iran, there were two great European powers that were vying for control in the region. One was to the north, and that was Russia. At this point in time, this is Tsarist Russia. Okay, the Russians, Nicholas I, Alexander II, Alexander III, Nicholas II, they were extending their territory, their control down into this region, and they wanted to keep going further and further south, kind of gobbling up more land, more resources. That's kind of how the Russians did their imperialism. The other rival power was the greatest of all the imperial superpowers, and that was Great Britain. And Great Britain controlled and influenced southern Iran. The British were mostly concerned with making sure that there was a friendly connection between their colonies here in Africa and their most important and influential colony of India. If someone controlled or captured Iran, let's say the Russians captured Iran, that means trade, communication, travel routes between British colonies in Africa and the British colony of India would be severed. Okay, so the British wanted to make sure Iran was friendly, and the Iranian Shah, okay, the Persian ruler, was on their side. And that's geopolitics. Okay, either side, now nobody knows about oil yet, so oil is not a concern yet. That's going to be a concern later on, and in fact, our next unit. But rather the position of Iran and how that played out for larger strategic purposes. Much like in our game of Risk, there may be places where maybe you don't care about, maybe there's not resources to be had there, but you're also looking at your opponents and what your opponents need and what maybe future threat your opponent could pose towards you. And you're playing the game in such a way and making decisions in such a way to always serve your best interest and try to undercut your opponent's interests. Okay. The label for this competition, last bit here, for this fight between the British and the Russians, this kind of risk-esque game, this geopolitical game, is going to be referred to as the quote-unquote the Great Game. And the Great Game as the competition between Russia and Britain over control of Persia. Okay, they'll go into Afghanistan as well. We won't worry about that. So control of Persia. Again, use the wonders of videos, hit pause if you need to write that down for your notes. The competition between Russia and Britain over control of Persia. All right. So that being said, that's our nice, fairly hopefully straightforward idea. What we'll do, and we'll use for the rest of our talks of not only the Middle East and all the other places with imperialism and a lot of other topics throughout the year, we're going to go back to that geopolitical central point. Now it's going to be a big motivating factor behind a lot of decisions that are made by great powers in the world. Okay, so thanks again for your patience. In the video, I'll upload that, and I will see you all tomorrow. Okay, so have a good day.